Activities similar to those at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. The release of balloons going on here, and the Grand Marshal of the ceremonies this weekend, Joan Rivers, has arrived. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bob Jenkins along with Larry Newber. This is a Trans-Am race on this 1.25-mile course here at Caesars Palace. 89 laps. It's the final event for the Trans-Am drivers this year, and a points battle is going on.
The Trans-Am series, Bob, has always been a little romantic. You know, it's one of those series that pits some of the top American-made cars against international cars. There are the point standings. You see David Hobbs on top, Tom Gloy in second, and Hobbs' teammate Willy T. Ribbs is in third. An interesting story, that team, Hobbs and Ribbs. They have had the fastest lap in every race except one this year. That is, the team has, one or the other. They're very quick and are the favorites here today. The series has always had a little bit of romance also involved with it. P.L. Newman, the racers know him. Yes, this is the same Paul Newman as in Hollywood.
It's a 1.25-mile course, but is it an oval or is it a road course?
That's a good question. They're calling it a modified oval. There are 5 turns here, and that may be an interesting challenge for a lot of the road racers who are accustomed to turning right most of the time rather than left. We're going counterclockwise today, and that's unusual for road racers, but it might be an advantage for some of the oval trackers like Dave Watson, a former ASA star who starts up near the front.
Well, the parachute jumpers are arriving, and we'll be back to take a look at the row assignments for today's race right after these messages. Thirty-one cars and drivers are on the track, and here is the starting lineup for today's Trans-Am race at Caesars Palace. On the front row, Willy T. Ribbs in car number 28 and Tom Gloy in number 8. Second row, Paul Newman, car number 33, and Dave Watson in 37. In the third row, David Hobbs in number 29 and Jerry Brassfield in car number 30. In the fourth row, car 1, Elliott Forbes Robinson and Wally Dallenbach Jr. in car number 4. In the fifth row, Paul Miller in car number 36 and Darren Brassfield in number 6. In the sixth row, Jim Durhaig in car number 40 and Frank Leary in 48. Seventh row, Richard Wall in car number 82 and George Follmer in 16. In the eighth row, car 5, Andy Porterfield and number 56, Craig Carter. In the ninth row, Les Lindley in car number 80 and John Brandt in number 60. The 10th row consists of Chris Gleason in number 2 and Lynn St. James in number 18. In the 11th row, Bruce Jenner drives car number 3 and Roger Penske Jr. number 9. The 12th row, Steve Saleen in number 12 and Rob McFarlin in 78. The 13th row, Rick Borlase in 58 and Larry Parks in 79. The 14th row, Frank Search in number 0 and Gary Shans in 31. The 15th row, Ken Yeo in number 35 and Terry Herman in 96. And the cars come down the straightaway and are looking for and get the green flag. The Caesars Palace Grand Prix for Trans-Am cars underway. They go into turn number 1, and Paul Newman from third starting position sneaks to the inside and passes Willy T. Ribbs, the pole sitter, as they head into turn number 1. But Ribbs, coming out of turn number 1, grabs the lead back.
Paul Newman made a very bold move there, Bob. Going into the first corner, he started behind Ribbs, and he got the jump on him, but I think he just overcooked it a little bit. Going into the number 1 corner, he washed out after taking the lead momentarily, and now he runs in second. He's being challenged by Gloy already.
The cars head for turn number 5, the slowest portion of the racetrack. Good battle for second place here between Gloy and Newman. It is Gloy jumping into second place as they come down the front stretch and complete lap number 1. Willy T. Ribbs is the leader, followed by Tom Gloy in second position and then Newman in third.
Well, in case you need some help, memorize that number and color, 28, red and white, Willy T. Ribbs. Watch for him to be near the front all day long. He and his teammate David Hobbs, as we told you earlier, have really been the hot shoes. Now here's that restarting, or rather the start of the racing, and look at Newman making a move like the others were anchored down to the racetrack going into the first corner, but as you can see, he went in just a little too hard. He was unable to hold his line, and Ribbs and then Gloy moved underneath. Now Newman in that Datsun got a nice jump coming out of the first corner, was able to hold off Gloy for about 3/4 of the first lap, but Gloy eventually did get him back.
So Willy T. Ribbs continues to be the leader here as lap number 2 has been completed. There's Willy T. in the Camaro, car number 28. Willy is from San Jose, California. He qualified for this race at 99.479 miles an hour, currently third in the Trans-Am point standings.
And mathematically, he has a chance at becoming the champion, but it would just have to be almost a complete washout in terms of performance and points by his teammate David Hobbs in order for Ribbs to become the champion.
Into turn number 5 once again. You can see the interval there between the first and second place cars. Let's describe for you a little bit more in detail this course that they're competing on here today. They cross the start-finish line and head into turn number 1. It's a relatively slow turn. They have to downshift and brake rather hard. Then coming out of it, they have a 1,485-foot straightaway in which the speeds will reach pretty close to 100 or 110 miles an hour. Then into turn number 2. Out of turn number 2, they have about a 900-foot straightaway to turn number 3. And then out of turn number 3 onto a 1,305-foot straightaway to turn number 5, which, as we said, is the slowest portion of the racetrack. Out of turn number 5 and again onto the front stretch.
Bob, it's kind of interesting because from turns 1 to 5, it's almost flat out all the way around. You got to slow down for turn number 2. A lot of the drivers have been downshifting at turn number 4, but you can really hot-foot it once you get out of tight number 1 and all the way around to that last turn down to what you got to call the front stretch here that goes through and past the pit area.
There's the leader, Willy T. Ribbs, perhaps the most proficient black race driver in the United States today. Car number 28, the Budweiser-sponsored Camaro. Once again out of turn number 4 onto the straightaway leading to turn number 5. Running in second position is still Tom Gloy, but Willy T. right now has a relatively comfortable lead.
Willie has had a great year, Bob. He really has. I think there is marked improvement in his ability behind the steering wheel in the 1983 season. And I can't help but think back to Tommy Thomas, a black driver whom those of us involved in racing were keeping our eyes on a few years ago. Tommy Thompson, it is to say, who was killed tragically in a Super V race at Trenton.
Well, we have talked about the Trans-Am cars and a little bit of an idea of what this race consists of in terms of the types involved.
Well, it's very interesting because it's the only American series that really, on a professional level, is pitting week to week the American manufactured cars like Camaros, Trans-Am, and Corvettes against some of the top models from Europe and across both of the oceans. The Porsches, the Datsuns. There's a formula which really makes the series pretty well evenly matched from car to car.
As far as horsepower is concerned, more than 600 in some Chevys and as low as 300 in the Datsuns. A fuel capacity 31.68 gallons, and they get about 4 miles per gallon. There will be no pit stops in today's race. They use automotive or aviation type fuel. The wheelbase of maximum 110 and the wheels maximum 10 inches in width, and all 4 have to be the same weight.
You might almost call it an international sedan series for sports cars, if you will. You know, NASCAR has that series known now as the Darlington Dash Cars that has a formula that equates European and foreign manufactured machinery with American machinery, and now so does SCCA. By the way, you notice the Datsuns were a little down on horsepower. They are given an advantage in terms of weight. They're lighter in weight.
There's a pretty good battle going on for 3rd, 4th, and 5th position here. In 3rd at the present time, Elliott Forbes Robinson. Right behind him is Dave Watson, and then Wally Dallenbach Jr., also David Hobbs involved in that race.
There you see the interval between 1st and 2nd. Ribbs opened up that lead really after about 2 laps. As you can see, we've completed 8. Gloy is keeping pace, but he's not able to move up and challenge Ribbs. You know, Bobby, you wonder at this point, as easily as Hobbs was, or rather as Ribbs was able to establish this lead, if he's just not pacing himself already, because Gloy is quick, but he can't move in.
As far as a breakdown on the number of cars involved in this race, there are 10 Camaros, 7 Corvettes, 6 Trans-Am cars, 2 Porsches, 2 Capris, a Firebird, a Thunderbird, a Datsun, and a Mustang. The Datsun, of course, driven by Paul Newman. The Firebird is, I should say, the Thunderbird is driven by Bruce Jenner, and we'll talk more about him a little bit later.
And look at Ribbs. Already, we're only on lap 10 of this race. He's moving up on slower traffic. You got a quick glimpse of the yellow number 31 of Gary Schanz. And here comes Ribbs already down the front stretch. The move-over flag, the courtesy flag being displayed. Schanz moves over. Ribbs gets by. And now here comes Gloy. Let's see how Sean plays this. He moves over also for Gloy. So 1st and 2nd get by as already lapping has begun.
Well, Sean's taking the heat of the move-over flag and doing so, going high into turn number 1, allowing the 2 faster cars to get by him. There is the leader once again, Willy T. Ribbs, moving into turn number 3 here on the Caesars Palace course, which is actually a parking lot.
Now, yesterday, Ribbs was commenting that he was a little concerned about tire wear in this race. The track was a little more abusive to the tires than what the competitors kind of expected while they were practicing and qualifying the last couple of days, and Ribbs did express some concern over that. So if indeed he is being conservative at all, it is undoubtedly because that is weighing on his mind. He knows right now that he is faster than the rest of this field in terms of horsepower and the handling characteristics of the race car. And we've had a spin, and it's Paul Newman.
Paul Newman, who started this race in third position, qualifying at 98.134 miles an hour, and who jumped into the lead when the green flag dropped going into turn number 1, but quickly lost it, has spun. However, he is getting back in competition. Paul Newman, the driver of car number 33. Here come the leaders around turn number 5.
And in case you're wondering, is this a publicity stunt? If you're not familiar with Paul Newman's race driving career, it is not, I guarantee you, by any stretch of the imagination, a publicity stunt. Here is a bona fide, legitimate professional race driver. There he is again, who won a Trans-Am race the very first time he ever sat behind the wheel of a Trans-Am car. Has a lot of experience in seat production. He was national champion in that division for SCCA. He's the oldest man to ever win a Trans-Am race, and a real fine racer, and I tell you, he's very serious about it. He's rock solid behind the wheel.
Willy T. Ribbs moving to the inside of the racetrack to get by Larry Park here on the front stretch going into turn number 1. Willy T. beginning to lap some of the slower cars here. Tom Gloy is still running in second position, and Elliott Forbes Robinson is in third. Another lap completed. Elliott Forbes Robinson is in third position, and running in fourth is Dave Watson.
Now, as temporary courses go, this one I suggest is pretty good. They seem to have enough room to maneuver out there. Ribbs is having not an easy time of it, but I would call it a routine time of it, getting through slower traffic. And the course is pretty fast, considering its length and the fact that we've got 5 corners. You see Ribbs right there coming out of the high-speed turn number 4, looking toward the final turn. There's Elliott Forbes Robinson, the defending champion of this series in the yellow car, being tailgated right now by Dave Watson. I think that's Darren Brassfield behind that duo.
And there is David Hobbs, who has to finish 13th or better in today's race in order to clinch the championship. Right now, David Hobbs is running in 5th position. And you can notice that these cars do have working taillights and stoplights.
Yeah, that's something we don't see all that often. You don't see stoplights on a Grand National stock car, or taillights, that is to say, or an Indianapolis car, but a lot of the attraction of this series from a spectator standpoint is that these are cars that just about all of us can relate to. They are very stock in appearance. The rules require them to remain that way, and there are a lot of stock components. And we've had another spin coming out of the slowest corner in this racetrack, and rode right in front of some of the field coming up. A race car pulls out in front of the rest of the field.
That's car number 0, driven by Frank Search, who got sideways coming out of turn number 5 and slid sideways down the main straightaway. Well, the most recent race in the Trans-Am series was at Riverside, California, and these are the results. David Hobbs was the winner. Willy T. Ribbs finished second. Paul Newman was third. Frank Leary was fourth, and Wally Dallenbach Jr. finished in 5th position at Riverside.
Well, Hobbs and Ribbs have each won 4 of these races apiece this season, and you saw Wally Dallenbach Jr.'s name up there. That was his first ever effort in a Trans-Am race car, coming home in 5th position. He certainly has established himself as somebody to keep their eyes on, for everybody to keep their eyes on in this series, at least in the next few months to come here.
Now the field tightening up just a little bit as the field files down the main straightaway into turn number 1 again. It is Willy T. Ribbs still leading, but not too far behind him is Tom Gloy. Running in 3rd position, Elliott Forbes Robinson, and then 4th is still Dave Watson, the short track veteran.
Darren Brassfield going by briefly there in car number 6, one of the few Corvettes that have entered this race. There is Hobbs working his way through slower traffic, going to the inside of Rick Borlase, coming out of turn number 5. There's a good panorama of the front stretch. Caesars Palace Grand Prix. They ran Indy cars here earlier this year, and interestingly enough, the Trans-Am cars were not all that much slower than a high-powered Indianapolis cars that also competed on this course.
We have completed 14 of 89 laps here at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas, Nevada. ESPN today presenting coverage of the Trans-Am race. With Willy T. Ribbs in car number 28, the Camaro leading. He has led all the way so far. Paul Newman jumped into the lead at the beginning of the race into turn 1, but Ribbs quickly grabbed the lead back going out of turn number 1, and Willy has held the advantage ever since.
Ribbs in his Camaro, fast all year long. He's looking very forward to the 1984 season. A lot of people assume that he's going to be a shoe-in, at least for some team, to take a chance on this driver for Indianapolis cars for next year. He's anxious, he's ready to go, and I don't think there are too very many racing observers around the country who would question the fact that Willy T. Ribbs is ready for a shot at Indianapolis.
Well, David Hobbs, of course, has driven at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway on occasion, is the current points leader in the Trans-Am standings at this point. And as we indicated, well, here's a car smoking coming down the straightaway. That's car number 78, driven by Rob McFarlin of Dallas, Texas. I don't know whether the car was smoking or whether he was just on the brakes hard going into the turn, Larry.
Well, Willy T. was breathing right down his tailpipes, and I think Rob may have been looking in the rearview mirror perhaps a little bit, and I think he just got on the binders a little too hard, and both of them did a pretty good job. There's a replay of it. You see him coming down that chute between turns 4 and 5. McFarlin probably glancing in the rearview mirror. The car gets a little bit out of shape. A lot of horsepower in terms of the horsepower to weight ratio in these cars. McFarlin out of shape, fishtailing. You see him getting on the brakes to try and hunker down the car. Willy T. fishtailing a little bit. No smoke from Willy T. though. He stays on the accelerator. T darted to the inside. Willy T. that is, darted to the inside and got around McFarlin without incident.
Well, a somewhat close call there for Willy T. Ribbs, but nevertheless, he maintains the lead here and has about a 12 or 15 car length advantage on Tom Gloy, still running in second position. Willy T. out of turn number 1 again, headed down that 1,400-foot straightaway to turn number 2.
And what about Gloy as we continue to watch the leader, Willy T. Ribbs? And we've had a crash. Richard Wall has slipped off of this flat course somewhere around the oval and crashed into an outer retainer.
Richard Wall from Arcadia, California, started 13th in this race, and extensive damage to the front end of the car. That brings out an overall yellow. Now, yellows are being handled as they are on a road course if there is an accident in a particular portion of the course and it's not serious. And here is Tom Gloy into the pits for a stop. If there is a yellow in a particular corner, they must not pass in that particular corner. However, this is an overall yellow, so the cars will slow down. The pace car comes out. Those are the standings. We have completed 20 of 89 laps at Las Vegas. Pace car pulls off of the track, and we are back to green at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas. Car coming into the pit area. That's Gary Shans. Meanwhile, the leader, Willy T. Ribbs, out of turn number 5 and headed for the green flag. 23 laps have been completed out of 89 as ESPN presents the Trans-Am race from Caesars Palace. Willy T. continues to lead, and he has held it all the way so far.
Held it all the way, and now he's in a very comfortable position because that man right there in the middle of the screen, Tom Gloy, who will have to work his way through the entire field after making a pit stop during the running of this yellow flag, was Ribbs' most closest adversary, I should say, and now Gloy is well back into the field. Watch Gloy, though. He'll be picking him up and laying him down and passing a lot of cars in the next 10 or 15 laps. Bob, I don't know if he lost a lap or not. He did pit under the yellow, and there's a good possibility that he was able to stay on the same lap with the leader, Willy T. Ribbs. We'll check that with scoring and get back to you on it.
Tom Gloy from Lafayette, California. This is a Capri that he is driving. Started second in the race, qualifying at 98.651 miles an hour. And you can see him passing some of the slower cars, trying to work his way back up toward the front. To challenge this guy, Willy T. Ribbs, the leader of the race in car number 28, the Budweiser Camaro.
Ribbs was the favorite coming into today's race. He had won 2 of the last 4 races. The reason why he's not as close to his teammate in points as you might think is that he's had 3 DNFs, did not finishes in the 1983 season. That really hurt his chances for the championship.
Willy T. down the front stretch again into turn number 1. He completed 25 laps of this race. Now out of turn number 1 down the 1,400-foot straightaway into turn number 2. Average speed in qualifying about 99 miles an hour, Larry, but these cars can attain speeds of probably up to somewhere around 120 at the fastest portion of the racetrack.
You know, Bob, they run road courses exclusively, and there are a lot of people who wonder just how fast would the Trans-Am cars be if they ever had an opportunity to get, say, to the high-bank, high-speed 2-mile oval at the Michigan International Speedway. That might be kind of interesting. They may be as quick on the top end, certainly on those big courses, as, say, the ASA cars. They're not quite as aerodynamic because there are a lot more stock parts on them, but they're very quick and very versatile race cars.
Well, there once again is Tom Gloy, who continues to work back up toward the front of the pack because of his pit stop just a few laps ago. Dave Watson in car number 37 is now in second position. But there is Gloy, and a spin right in front of him. That is Bruce Jenner in car number 3, spinning in turn number 1. Jenner, the 21st qualifier. You can see him stuck in the sand there, the car unable to move. Bruce Jenner, yes, it is the Bruce Jenner of Olympic fame.
Yeah, we talked about the glamour affiliated with this as we look at a replay of Jenner going into turn number 1. He's watching Tom Gloy behind him probably, and the Thunderbird just gets out from underneath Bruce. Bruce has been driving a lot of production-type cars the last couple of seasons. This was his first ever, however, start in the Trans-Am for the 1976 decathlon winner from the Olympic Games.
Well, this is a local yellow. That means the cars must slow down only in the first turn area, but they can work back up to speed and pass at other portions of the racetrack. Not an overall yellow, as we had a few laps ago. So Willy T. Ribbs in car number 28 continues to lead, coming out of turn number 5 here down the main stretch, which actually has a slight dog leg to it. As you can see, the championship auto racing team's vehicle coming out onto the racetrack to try to get the Bruce Jenner car out of the sand there in turn number 1.
Yeah, that's one of the hazards of racing in this part of the country. When you slide off course, you've got a pretty good chance you might end up in the sand.
So Bruce Jenner trying to get out of the sand. There are the standings. Ribbs, Watson, Dallenbach, Robinson, and Hobbs. We have completed 29 out of 89 laps, and we are presenting the Trans-Am race at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas. We do have an overall yellow situation here because of the spin down in turn number 1 involving Bruce Jenner. So the pace car is out on the racetrack right now. However, we do anticipate a green flag momentarily. The pace car moving to the inside of the track now between turns 4 and 5. Here comes the field through turn number 5 now and onto the front stretch. And as they pass by the start-finish line, they will receive the green flag. There it is, 33 out of 89 laps completed. We are back to racing. Willy T. leads him down. There are 2 slower cars between Willy T. and second place Dave Watson there in car number 37. He's the second place driver right now.
You got a quick glimpse there as we go back up front and look at Ribbs at Paul Newman, who had to swerve a little bit going into turn number 1. Newman is fighting to gain ground. He's at least a lap down because of a couple of spins, and he almost had a meeting there with David Hobbs going into turn number 1. Hobbs, who's trying to run a relatively conservative, at least conservative for him, race today.
Now Wally Dallenbach in the red car moves up to challenge Dave Watson through turn number 4. Here is Dave Watson now. And as they come down the straightaway and under the bridge, we'll get a clock on him to see what kind of speed he is turning on this 1.25-mile road course. For timing, Dave Watson in car number 37. Dallenbach in that red car moving to the inside of a slower car between turns 1 and 2.
Well, that's Rick Borlase. He's slower at some places on the course. He seems to be a little faster in that Porsche on other courses. It gives you an idea how driving can really be a factor. When you brake, when you downshift, how you get up to the gears as you're accelerating. Again, the clock is on Dave Watson. Remember that the front runners qualified at just a little bit under 100 miles an hour here, about 41 seconds.
Watson out of turn number 5 onto the main stretch again as he crosses under the bridge. Our clock will stop. It's 42.1 seconds for Dave Watson.
That's just about what the top 10 cars qualified at. A little slower than what Watson himself qualified at, but you normally expect to lose some of that edge that you have kind of turned up, you know, for qualifying when you're out during the actual race. There's a pan back from second place to the third place running Wally Dallenbach Jr. and to
car number 58, driven by Rick Borlase from Las Vegas, Nevada, in a Porsche. He started 25th. There is the 5th place car, driven by David Hobbs from Upper Boddington, England. David, of course, the former IndyCar driver who concentrates mainly now on the Trans-Am Series and needs to finish 5th or better here today to clinch, make that 13th or better here today to clinch the Trans-Am Championship.
Hobbs really is an interesting story. In addition to what Bob has already mentioned, he's also run some Formula One. He's run Can-Am successfully. 24 years this man has been driving race cars. He started driving back in 1959. He's even had a stint in Grand National stock cars in the South. And there is Newman. Bob, I think he's had a problem again.
Paul Newman in turn number 5, spinning once again, and it's been a tough day so far for Paul Newman. Twice he has spun off of the course. Newman started the race in 3rd position and really made a bold move at the start of the race, but unfortunately he's had 2 spins so far in this event. We're timing Willy T. Ribbs now on his lap. There is the interval between himself and Dave Watson in car number 37, the 2nd place runner.
You know, as we watch Watson, just one more comment about Newman. His best finish in 1983 has been a 3rd. He's currently 8th in the point standing, so you got to figure there's something that's just not right with the setup of that race car, because normally he's very solid in this Trans-Am Series.
Willy T. Ribbs off of turn number 5 on to the front stretch. Remember, Dave Watson's clocking was about 42.1, and Ribbs turned the lap at 40 seconds even, so a good lap there for Willy T.
Not only a good lap, but faster than he qualified. So Ribbs, who looks like he's running a very smooth and comfortable line, we have not seen him off course. We've not seen any of that telltale smoke when you have to get out of the binders too soon. It looks like he's running a pretty good race. I don't want to use the word conservative, but certainly comfortable, Bob. And yet he's going faster than what he did when he qualified.
Well, the standings at this point, Willy T. Ribbs is the leader. 2nd position, Dave Watson. 3rd is Wally Dallenbach Jr. In 4th position is David Hobbs. And 5th at this point is Elliott Forbes Robinson. Tom Gloy, who was among the top runners, remember made a pit stop several laps ago, is still fighting his way back up front, and right now unofficially is running in 8th position.
That yellow car is the defending champion of the series, Elliott Forbes Robinson, the only driver, by the way, in the history of SCCA to win all 3 of the major professional series, a main event in those series. That is to say, the Can-Am, the Trans-Am, and the Super Vs. He was the 1982 Trans-Am champion, as we've mentioned. He's also a former champion in the Super Vs.
Elliott Forbes Robinson makes his home now in Denver, North Carolina. He is driving a Trans-Am in this Trans-Am race. He started in 7th position, qualifying at 97.795 miles an hour. Another one of those who has tried his hand at Indy cars.
Yes, he has, but he seems to really feel most comfortable in the SCCA series, where he's been very successful. He has a win, by the way, in 1983 in this series. He's currently ranked 4th in the point standings, but he had to skip 3 events. Sponsorship, money, and all that, you know. It was tough even for a defending champion. Here's one of the real fine fellows in all the world of automobile racing. A very personable guy who has tried every type of racing I think there is that exists, and he's had a level of success in every division he's competed in.
Talking about Elliott Forbes Robinson, the driver of car number 1, who is running in 5th position at this time in the Caesars Palace Grand Prix for Trans-Am cars. And Robinson looks like got on the brakes too hard as he entered turn number 4 and spins off of the race course. So we're talking about Elliott Forbes and a little bit of fire there on the right side of the race car, perhaps just some fuel burning off of the exhaust, but it puts a black mark on the race car. Elliott Forbes looks like it's going to get back on the racetrack. Simply looked like he was going too fast into the turn and had to get on the brakes too hard.
Well, Bob, on this race course, you have to drive every inch of the way. There is no banking on the corners to save you if you lose it. You see a little bit of smoke beginning to come out. He's on the brakes. He realizes he's gone in just too hard, and boy, it comes around right away. That 500-plus horsepower, just a little bit too much for that corner. And again, this place is flat as a pancake, as Bob told you earlier. It's a parking lot out back of Caesars Palace, and you have to drive the car. Nothing saves you. The racetrack is not going to be very forgiving. And with all this horsepower and a relatively light race car, less than 3,000 pounds, you're right on the very edge of the cliff, really, every second of the day.
And there is Willy T. Ribbs, who continues to lead our race. He has led all the way so far, has a relatively comfortable lead right now on Dave Watson. Watson about a straightaway here behind as Willy T enters turn number 1. Watson comes out of turn number 5. It's a pretty good battle for fourth position, third and fourth position, I should say, involving David Hobbs and Wally Dallenbach. Hobbs moving to the inside in turn number 1, and David Hobbs in a car that is a teammate to Willy T moves into third place, and Wally Dallenbach Jr. drops back to fourth.
Hobbs' first real move of aggression in this race. Apparently he has felt that the time has now arrived where he really needs to assert himself to assure a top 5 finish.
So Dave Watson is in second position. Now David Hobbs is in third, and Wally Dallenbach Jr. is in fourth. Willy T continues to be our leader. We'll be back with more from the Caesars Palace Grand Prix in just a moment. "55 out of 89 laps completed. Willy T. Ribbs the leader. Watson second. David Hobbs third. Tom Gloy is fourth. And Elliott Forbes Robinson running in fifth position. There's Willy T. as he approaches a slower car. That's Rob McFarlin driving car number 78.
T goes to the inside of McFarlin, coming out again. Turn number 4 now heading toward a downshift and a heavy break into turn number 5. If Willy T had any concerns about the tires, we've had enough caution flags in this race that may have saved him as he begins to move up on number 80 of Les Lindley, another one of the drivers near the back of the pack, as Willy T. Ribbs puts another lap on him. No, that's David Hobbs, the teammate of Willy T. Ribbs, who's trying to become the champion. There's Tom Gloy, one of the few Ford products running up front in this race here today, as Hobbs goes by to complete another lap. He continues to run comfortably up in the top 3, at least at this juncture.
So Tom Gloy, who made a pit stop earlier and has been battling his way back up front, is now in fourth position. So Tom Gloy has made a bold move up toward the front and is in a position to challenge for the lead once again.
That black car coming at you with the yellow writing on the windshield, that is Roger Penske Jr. Now, we have seen Roger Penske Jr. in Super V races the past couple of seasons on ESPN. Today is his first effort behind the wheel on a Trans-Am car, and he started right alongside of Bruce Jenner, another first-timer.
There's an idea of the interval between the leader, Willy T. Ribbs, and Dave Watson in car number 37, who's running second. It's a pretty comfortable lead right now for that man, Willy T. Ribbs.
Started to comment that the number of caution flags, there's Paul Newman back in the pits again, may have been just enough to cool the tires down frequently enough to protect any abuse that they may have been getting, as we once again go back up to David Hobbs, and he puts a lap on Elliott Forbes Robinson. Elliott Forbes Robinson goes down a lap, and it looks like that his hopes for victory have definitely now been dashed here today.
Elliott Forbes started in 7th place, but has fallen a lap down to the leader, Willy T. Ribbs. Here he is moving out of turn number 1 down the straightaway, headed to turn number 2. A car smoking badly and spinning in turn number 1. That's Les Lindley in car number 80. It looks like some oil got down onto the racetrack and ignited just momentarily, causing Lindley to spin out in turn 1, and luckily everybody else got by safely.
It's got to be slick down there, Bob, because Lindley did lay down some oil. You saw it catch on fire as he spun into turn number 1. Some of the cars taking advantage of this yellow flag. There's Bruce Jenner in for it looks like a change of tires on the right side.
And a car also spinning. That is Jerry Brassfield in car number 30. Brassfield spinning in that oil that was laid down by Les Lindley. 2 cars have spun.
Oh, traffic jam. Right there in turn number 1, you saw Wally Dallenbach go by a few seconds ago. Some of the other competitors coming up in the back were not quite so lucky, almost.
Les Lindley has gotten out of the race car, and the course is yellow once again. And for Les Lindley in car number 80 in turn number 1, it was hang on for your life.
You cannot tell the bowl-playing teams without a program anymore. There are a lot of them, but it is kind of nice to see teams like Boston College and BYU get a chance to play.
Back at Las Vegas in the Caesars Palace Grand Prix, the reason we are yellow is because of this spin involving Les Lindley in car number 80. Some oil dumped on the racetrack. Looks like he spun in his own oil, and less is okay, but we do have a yellow situation on the racetrack right now with the pace car out there.
Willy T. Ribbs continues to lead this race. He's been very dominant here today. He's been strong all year long. Of the 11 races so far, 6 times in those 11 races, he has had the fastest competitive lap during the running of the race. His team, the Diatley Budweiser team, Camaros, have won 9 times. Both he and his teammate Hobbs have won 4. And they had a Renner racer one day, a Renner driver that is to say, John Ball Jr., who picked up the 9th victory for that team in 1983.
Off of turn number 5 onto the main stretch, and the green flag waves once again. 66 laps are completed out of 89 that will make up this Trans Am race. Willy T. Ribbs heading for turn number 1 once again. Running in second position is Dave Watson, and third is David Hobbs. Willy T. into turn number 2 now, and that Budweiser Camaro. Willy has led all the way here this afternoon.
And there, I believe, is Hobbs. It's real difficult to tell apart the numbers 28 and 29. They're painted exactly alike, and from a distance, particularly on a television camera, 8s and 9s look pretty similar. There's Tom Gloy, who has gotten around David Hobbs, and here's a list of the competitors who have been claimed by attrition.
Paul Miller, Darren Brassfield, Richard Wall, George Follmer, and Les Lindley have all dropped out because of one reason or another. Also Chris Gleason, Steve Saleen, Gary Shawns, Terry Herman, and Rick Ware. All those cars out of competition. We have 21 cars remaining in the race at this point.
There were 60 drivers who entered this race over a week ago before qualifying in practice. It was narrowed down to 30. And now, as Bob mentioned, just down to 21, but they've all been chasing the exhaust and the heels of Willy T. Ribbs, who has been absolutely superior in terms of the performance of that race car on track here today.
But without doubt, here is the story of the race, Larry. Tom Gloy in car number 8, he made a pit stop early on during a yellow. He did not lose a lap, and now has worked his way back up into 3rd position, running now with David Hobbs there in car number 29. Hobbs is in 4th place, and Wally Dallenbach Jr. there in the red car is in 5th.
Well, for Gloy, that's the appropriate place to be. He's finished 3rd no less than 6 times this year. He won the last race in the trail a year ago, and a lot of people thought he might be the odds-on favorite to be champion in 1983. But he's had a lot of tough breaks. He has run up front. He was the fast qualifier the first couple of races this year, but boy, Lady Luck has just not been on his side, but she sure has given him a lot of 3rd places. And I tell you, if I had to make a prediction, I think that's probably where Gloy is going to finish in 3rd. He's been there 6 times before. We've got some debris out on the racetrack.
So that's going to slow the cars down here momentarily as some debris has come off one of the race cars. We're not sure which car that is from. We'll try to get a idea of who it is. There is Willy T, meanwhile, continuing to lead the event out in turn number 3 as we give you an idea of how much of a lead he has over Dave Watson. It's a healthy lead at this point. Now in turn number 4, headed for turn number 5. Willy T. Ribbs, the leader of the Caesars Palace Grand Prix for Trans Am cars, out of turn number 5 now onto the main straightaway, picking up speed, coming down the front stretch, which is 1,755 feet long.
Boy, from those aerial shots, you can see how thin that ribbon of black which comprises the racetrack. And there's the damaged car. Look, yeah, it's the number 30 car of Jerry Brassfield. Has obviously come into contact with the tail end of one of the other competitors, damaged the front end, and part of the bumper was left lying on the racetrack, and I believe that the bumper has now been removed, and we're back to a full-scale green, commenting about how thin that black, narrow ribbon of asphalt really looks from these aerial shots. Now, bear in mind, their cars are reaching speeds well up into the vicinity of 120 to 130 miles per hour. It's flat as a pancake, and it's a little slippery because it is new pavement. It's also dusted with sand because we're out here in the desert. Guys are doing a pretty good job, I'll tell you about it.
So it is Willy T. Ribbs leading the race with Dave Watson running in 2nd position. Tom Gloy is in 3rd, David Hobbs 4th, and Wally Dallenbach Jr. is 5th. 76 out of 89 laps completed. We'll be back with more from Caesars Palace Grand Prix. Bob Jenkins and Larry Newber back at the Las Vegas Caesars Palace Grand Prix. Here is Bruce Jenner pulling into the pit area, and the Hollywood celebrities that we have in this race, namely Bruce Jenner and Paul Newman, have not fared well today. Paul Newman has spun at least twice and made a couple of visits to the pits. Bruce Jenner has spun once and now is also into the pits.
Unlike Newman, however, who has a lot of experience in these cars and is in the top 10 in the point standings, this is today is Bruce Jenner's first ever effort behind the wheel of a Trans Am car. He has been running several other divisions the past couple of seasons, but today the first time in these cars.
5 laps to go. Willy T. Ribbs is the leader into turn number 1. And trouble right in front of Willy T. Car 60, driven by John Brandt, spins right ahead of Willy T. Also involved there was Frank Search, who managed to avoid the trouble. And Brandt gets back onto the racetrack. That's the second time this afternoon that Ribbs has had trouble develop right in front of him.
Now look at this situation. Right now it looks like Ribbs is in deep trouble. He's outside of Search. Brandt spins right in front of him. Search does a good job of not panicking. He avoids Brandt, and Willy T was going just slow enough and had quick enough reflexes that he immediately jerked his car to the left, and both of them got by without even touching the spinning number 60 of John Brandt. A great job.
Here is David Hobbs, who is in 5th position, and if he can stay there, he has the championship for Trans Am in 1983 wrapped up. David Hobbs running in 5th position here. The leader continues to be Willy T. Ribbs, with Dave Watson running in 2nd position as we watch Hobbs come down the front stretch here.
Now for David, he's had a successful year. Sometimes he's a little crusty. I'll tell you, David is very candid. He had a run-in with Paul Newman in the early part of the season, and before today's race, he said that he was going to drive with his head. Made some comments about, how the other people might participate. But David, I'll tell you, he's a pretty solid racer. He likes to have a lot of fun. He likes to have a lot of fun with people, a lot of fun with words. He's had a great season in the Trans Am, and he decided that it was very important to his career to be the champion. And he says he's going to stay around for at least another year. And he's really done quite well. He's been a solid competitor all season long.
Well, look at the interval now between 1st and 2nd position. Dave Watson has definitely closed in on the leader, Willy T. Ribbs. Watson right now trying to get around the slower car of Jim Derhaag in car number 40 out of turn number 4, and you can see Derhaag there motioning Dave Watson around. Watson moves to the inside, approaching turn number 5, but now the interval between 1st and 2nd position less than 2 seconds down the straightaway with 2 laps to go.
Well, Derhaag in that silver Corvette has finished every one of the races so far in 1983. He's been as solid as any competitor in the category of consistency, and it looks like he's going to finish another one as we go back again and look at Willy T. Ribbs. He's got some open wheel experience, by the way. He's been active in Formula Atlantic and has sat on the pole at Long Beach in the past 2 seasons.
Bruce Jenner has climbed out of his T-Bird and has called it a day. Bruce Jenner out of competition. There once again the interval between 1st and 2nd position. Headed for turn number 5 once again. Willy T. Ribbs now being pursued very closely by Dave Watson in 2nd position. They come out of turn number 5 and down the straightaway. We're on the last lap. They do not display a white flag in this type of racing, but this is the last lap. Watson trying to close in and challenge Willy T. for the lead. Willy T. has had a tremendous race, has led all the way so far, but Watson is trying to turn that around here in the final lap.
The experienced oval tracker Dave Watson in the sky blue car on the right. Maybe it's petty blue, I don't know, but he's a former ARTCO champion, a former ASA champion, and he's close to within striking distance, but I don't think he's going to have enough time. Down that straightaway between turns 4 and 5, now to the very slow 5th turn. It looks like it's going to be Willy T., Bob.
That's Andy Porterfield that the drivers are going around. Watson gets around, but the checkered flag comes out, and it is Willy T. Ribbs winning the Caesars Palace Grand Prix for Trans Am cars. Willy T. Ribbs is the winner, with Dave Watson finishing in 2nd position. A great afternoon for Willy T. And here is his teammate, David Hobbs, who is going to wind up in 5th position and is going to win the points championship for Trans Am cars in 1983. We'll be back to talk with the winner, Willy T. Ribbs, after these messages. Back at Caesars Palace, where Willy T. Ribbs has won the Trans Am competition here this afternoon. Down in Victory Lane, Willy T., it seemed like you had easy going for most of the race. However, in the late stages, Dave Watson closed in.
Yeah, it was tight. In the beginning, it was no problem. The tires were good on the car. They were fresh, like any good tires. In the beginning, towards the end, they started to wear off. And we ran 2 different sets of tires on the car. And, you know, it wasn't any problem. But towards the end, I got caught up in traffic, and it allowed Watson to close up on me. And, you know, I felt we could squeak it out, and we did. We gave him the stick.
And our congratulations on the win. Here's the race summary. The time of the event, 1 hour, 12 minutes and 53 seconds. The average speed, 82.323 miles an hour. A 3-second victory for Willy T over Dave Watson. And Willy T led all 89 laps. So the teammates, Willy T and David Hobbs, both come out winners here today.
And a great season for the John Dick prepared Diatley Budweiser team. They win 10 of the 12 races. Tom Gloy comes home third in the point standings. Defending champion Elliott Forbes Robinson fourth. Frank Leary, a consistent finisher all year long, comes home in fifth position. Jim Durhag finished every race, come home in sixth in the point standings, followed by Gene Felton, oval tracker Dave Watson, Paul Newman, and the highest ranking lady in all of professional racing this year, Lynn St. James.
Well, we checked the top 10 finishers here this afternoon in Las Vegas. The winner, Willy T. Ribbs in car number 28, the Camaro. In second position, Dave Watson. Tom Gloy came back to win third place. David Hobbs finished fourth. Wally Dallenbach Jr. was fifth. Finishing in sixth position was Jerry Brassfield. Jim Durhag was seventh. Craig Carter was eighth. Andy Porterfield ninth. And Frank Leary was 10th. Thank you for joining us here at Las Vegas today. This is Bob Jenkins for Larry Newber. So long, everyone.